Uh, so let me start by introducing myself. I'm Jason Rauceo. I am the director of the cell and molecular biology major. I've been to John Jay now going on about 10 years. Well, yeah, let's say 10 to 12 years. I lose count. That's how old we get here. I'm a trained molecular microbiologist. So I'm also a product of CUNY. I got my 4-year bachelor's of science at Hunter College across the park. From there, I also stayed in the PhD program for the City University of New York, where I was able to earn my PhD in microbiology. From there, I went to Columbia University to do a postdoc again in microbiology. And from there, I made my way to academia. So that road, hey Ed, that road is one of the traditional roads you would hear about in respect to where to go from education to employment. And the idea of this talk today, I was invited in a sense to not just discuss opportunities in the sciences in terms of thinking of careers, but also maybe give a little insight in terms of the pathway. So I brought with me a small presentation from the American Society of Microbiology regarding clinical microbiologist careers. I focus specifically on clinical microbiology, not because of my bias as a microbiologist. Yeah, because of that, but also with the COVID-19 pandemic we're in right now, I feel this is a targeted area for the job market over the next 10 years. So we'll briefly explore a few slides from there and look at a few websites regarding employment. So as I mentioned at the beginning a few minutes ago, if you could type a few questions in the chat box of what you expect or what you want to know regarding job opportunities, that will help. One question just came in from Shasha. Okay, if I got your name right, hopefully I did. I want to know if cell biology is an appropriate major for students who want to attend medical school in the future. Absolutely. So I'll go into those details. But first, I'm just going to pull up our web page for the CMB major. And for those of you who have never visited our web page, this will be brief. I'm sharing my screen now, and you're now looking at my computer screen. And this is the page right out of the undergraduate bulletin that gives a quick summation of what the major offers. What I just want to briefly highlight is the last sentence. Students in this major are well prepared for a variety of careers and graduate programs, including PhD programs in the life sciences, medical school, and related professional degrees. So those are 3 areas. But that statement could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. Some may even say it's vague or too broad. Keep in mind, this is for a website, so we cannot provide a detailed bulleted list because it can go on forever. But what I want to emphasize right away is while those are the 3 foundational fields, within those fields, you have a plethora of career, not just job, but career building opportunities. Okay, so for a lot of folks, we're under this 2-road paradigm. I get a degree in science, I go on to advanced grad school or professional school, and either I go into a clinical career, such as a physician, or I go into a research career, meaning academia. And it seems like this binary pathway, but what I want to highlight is there's so many different opportunities. So one thing that I like to do in my advisement sessions is, other than just talking about what courses are great to register for in the fall, things like that, I like to give students on a sort of a career building exercise where we start off by saying, what is it that you're interested in? And not just the science, not just I love nature, things like that, but where can you see yourself 5 to 10 years from now? What is your economic playbook? What, in terms of how much finance, what's your financial outlook? How much money do you want to make? Where do you want to live? These are starting point questions that sometimes we don't ask in science. We always start off with saying, how much do you love science? I prefer to start off with thinking about how much money do you think you're going to need? And what are the jobs that are open in order to do that? Okay. So for example, I just now pulled up one website, Science Careers, and this is provided by the American Academy of Sciences. And it's you could scan all of the latest jobs from this website. See all the latest jobs, search jobs. I mean, there's so many websites where you could probably find jobs. I find this to be one of the many that's attractive and really has a variety of different types of jobs. So by pulling up this page, we could see the diverse types of jobs here. Look at this. This is highlighting my point of we're not just focusing on a trajectory that takes you either down the road of becoming a professor, a research professor, or a medical doctor. So headline jobs: assistant professor, tenure track, Department of Chemistry, Vancouver, British Columbia. Gives you a little bit of the salary, starting salary. We're starting in 6 figures. So for a lot of places in the country, let's say New York City, 6 figures may be average to survive. But outside of New York City, the 6-figure starting salary can go a much longer way in respect to cost of living. Moving down just one slot here: assistant staff, learner research institute, faculty, fellow positions, faculty of business, okay? Faculty position in microbial pathogenesis, faculty in postdoc positions, and so forth. There are several related links here to click on where you could now look for the type of jobs that you may be interested in. But just a glance at what they call their headline jobs, we could see it breaks down into both academic positions for teaching/research, research level positions at academic or medical schools, and the assistant staff and faculty fellow positions in business. Okay, so that's a small sort of snapshot at one online reference. And for every major science society, whether it's the American Society of Microbiology or American Society for Cell Biology, a lot of these, their web pages they have job or career development resources as part of their website. So instead of just Googling science jobs, which will give you so many hits and then you may get lost just in the initial search, I always recommend an attractive place to start would be to look at some of these foundations or societies where they list a lot of their job postings. Okay, so the next place I want to make the second stop, and this is also part of my advisement sessions, which I like to walk through with students, is the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay? So this is our tax dollar funds these federal agencies, and this is a repository where you could essentially search this website, enter in any job title that you choose, and it will give you back a myriad of facts, statistics, and useful information regarding the field. So I already started our search here with microbiologists. You just type in a microbiologist and look at what the information that we could see that it pulls up right away. Starts off with basic questions. What do they do? What's their work environment? How do you become one? Pay, job outlook, etc., etc. Okay, this is the first page that will come up, and you see several tabs. Each of these tabs, once you click on it, you can get relative information. So interestingly, some of the more updated statistics shows that the median pay, what's falling right in the number from a range of salaries, is $75,000 per year on an hourly basis, about $36.37 an hour. The requirement, 4-year degree, no major work experience required. I'll put an asterisk by that. That's not something that is a given depending on the job you may be applying for. On-the-job training, none necessarily required. The number of jobs, and what's important here that I want to highlight is the outlook. It's trending up. As we can see, the pandemic that we're currently experiencing opens up opportunities, especially in diagnostic fields as well as clinical microbiology fields. So it's not surprising that the numbers for the job outlook in a 10-year window is trending upwards, okay? This is important that we think about this now in terms of the technologies moving forward. So just pulling up a standard microbiologist's job description in terms of what you'll be doing and surveying the salaries the job trends. And if we move to looking at direct wages in New York City, I found an interesting uh, statistic here where the location, the predominant area in metropolitan areas for microbiologists, I might be scrolling a little fast, I'm sorry, but right here is where I wanted to get to. Metropolitan areas with the highest employment level in this occupation. And as we could see, the Northeast, the South, and the West Coast tend to be the hubs for where you will find the highest employment for microbiologists. And it highlights going across each column: employment, employment per thousand jobs, hourly wage, and annual wage. If we go across to the tri-state area, we're looking at close to 80K a year in the tri-state, or at least Newark and New Jersey. I said tri-state, forgive me. I'm not, it's usually New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, not Pennsylvania. But nevertheless, over here in the Northeast, New York City in itself would be a hub for microbiology jobs. So, in summary, just as a brief opening, started thinking about how do I get information is how I'd like to summarize this first segment. And this is where I want to emphasize to you at least one critical website, which holds more than a specialized website, is the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. So if you're interested in becoming a computational biologist, for example, let's just try that out, see what happens, right? Let's see if we get a hit. I'm exploring this. I mentioned computational biologists because right now, in terms of pandemic response, computer modeling and the ability to handle lots of data, okay, modeling in a sense of if we're designing therapeutics to counteract SARS-CoV infections and we need to do computer simulations before we go to the lab and actually do the real bench work, there's a lot of opportunities in building or at least hiring and developing strategies that incorporate computational modeling. And just by typing that here, we get a series of hits, okay? A series of hits where we can click on. So again, I want to summarize the value of this particular website, folks. If you have your pen and your paper, definitely jot that down as a place you'd like to visit today and begin your search so that you can start looking at the nuance of your related field that you may be considering. And I always say, don't just have one plan, have multiple plans, okay? And think outside the box. So a brief digression, since I was in CUNY, like a lot of, as most of you in the room are CUNY students or may have only attended CUNY, when I was undergrad, I was under the impression that my only two roads were going into research as a professor or going to medical school. And as I was going through CUNY, through my years at Hunter, the value of the experience I had with the mentoring and the resources cannot be understated in terms of my training. However, one area that I did notice once I made the transition to Columbia wasn't so much the science itself, because DNA is DNA no matter where you go. But I did find something really interesting where the folks at Columbia Business School would periodically come by the folks where I was located at the immunology and molecular biology division during our Friday night beer mixers, where we just sort of, most of the science students and postdocs would get together to just talk about stuff over beer. But every now and then you'd have a few business school students that would stop by and like, well, why are you here? And they were just like, yeah, we're just here to pick your brain because, you know, part of our sort of job, the way we think in the business school, or what type of investment opportunities, venture capitalists or startup companies are possibly being developed here in the sciences. So we want to have the crosstalk. And I mentioned that, I go into that little story because that's one thing I could say, yes, at John Jay, we don't have a business school where all of a sudden you could start thinking about science in a sort of an entrepreneurial framework. So at times we miss out on the opportunities if you're into being your own boss, for example, and saying, well, why not start up my own diagnostic business for COVID-19 testing? I have a great idea on how I can improve on a technology, and I'd like to start up my own company, right? Would I be able to get the correct mentoring and be put on the path to do that at John Jay? So I would say, well, you'd probably need to go to Baruch that has a business department. But again, I don't want to digress too much. The point that I'm emphasizing here is The fact that different universities or different academic environments can enhance your sort of or expand your idea of where to go in terms of finding the career that meets your needs. So thinking outside the box would be the take home bottom line message here. And the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, this is a really useful website for when you do want to drift outside the box. I want to pause. Are there any sort of questions we want to just break really quickly before I go into my second segment, where I'll just show you a slideshow in terms of where I hone in on one particular field itself in the biology community, which is clinical microbiologists. I'll take any brief questions, folks. Let me stop sharing for the moment. I'm screen sharing. Okay, I'm looking at the, anything in the chat room, or anybody have anything we'd like to say to start? I can't see faces. I'm just seeing a generic screen in front of me.
So while you were actually like explaining and showing the website, I was also looking at it like on my own computer, and like I tried to find like, because I want to become a genetic counselor, but I don't know what category that would necessarily fall under, because it's not
genetics. I only heard the first part. I heard genetic, but did you say genetic counselor? Am I filling in the wrong?
genetic counselor.
Okay.
So what category would that necessarily fall under?
Genetic counselor. So you type those words in the BLS and it did not give you a direct hit, correct?
Yeah, it didn't. No, it didn't.
Okay, so now I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on that website. I may type in the word geneticist, right? That might be a different way of looking to see what information. So in terms of genetic counselor, they may not have specific information with that title, but you could type in a geneticist and see what happens there. But if the question now is, will this major prepare me for a career in genetic counseling? If I wanted to, for example, enroll in a master's program for genetic counseling, the answer is emphatically yes. So tying your next step, Taisha, to this program directly, the coursework that are you a CMB major, Taisha, or are you?
Yeah, I'm a CMB major.
Okay, so as a CMB major, the coursework you will take in your 4-year degree will prepare you for the next stage, which will most likely be a master's program. From the best of my knowledge, genetic counselors, and I may be wrong on this, maybe Edgardo could intervene and correct me, but I don't believe that's a program that requires a PhD in order to be as a certified genetic counselor. You can always get a PhD and do genetic counseling, but to the best of my knowledge, a master's program in genetics counseling is where you would take the next step. So you're on the right track at John Jay and you're in the right program for the next step. I would challenge you now to go beyond the title. And now this is where the exercise started before, to say, okay, genetic counselor, what does a genetic counselor do? How much will I earn as a genetic counselor? And what is the growth potential within that field? Am I working under a hospital, a clinical group? Am I working under an academic group? Am I working by myself in my own company? So we could start with one example here as genetic counselor and then expand it or ask those sort of sub questions to begin your journey in thinking, how can I build a career out of this? So the academic training, that's straightforward. I find a competitive program, I enroll. If I get accepted, I take the coursework, I get the certification. But once I get the certification, what happens next? And that's what I think is the idea now of digging a little bit deeper in terms of career development. Thank you for that comment regarding genetic counselor. Anyone else with another question regarding? Anyone else? The floor is open. Okay, so let's just transition into this next segment here. Hopefully you guys can see my screen, my PowerPoint presentation, and I was able to grab this from the American Society of Microbiology, of which I'm a member. If any of you in the audience are interested in microbiology, I encourage you to join the society. It's actually for students, a yearly membership for students is not expensive. So it's good to, and some of the benefits is you get resources, you get information, discounts at attending meetings if you're part of a lab. And in general, it's good to be part of these societies. It's great to put on your resume moving forward. And let's go through this presentation. I won't go into all of the details, but the key now is it's exploring a career in clinical and public health microbiology. Again, I'm biased today, folks, because I'm a microbiologist and we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I find that this is a great area to think about job and career development. So what's the difference? So a clinical microbiologist, they highlight investigates microorganisms that cause infectious diseases, in contrast to a public health microbiologist that focuses on microorganisms which threaten the public's health. So we could say right now, if we're using SARS-CoV-2 is our model organism right now in respect to job creation, there's opportunities in both fields because COVID-2 is definitely threatening the public health, and understanding how COVID works, how we can diagnose it, how we can design therapeutics involves a merging of both fields. So there's just lots of opportunities. In fact, before I move to the next slide, if anyone was a graduating senior, I advised a few students who are graduating John Jay and other colleges this summer to look into jobs as contact tracers, where just graduating, the only requirement was having a degree in sciences, and the starting salary was pretty solid for essentially just tracking who folks may have come in contact with if they came in contact with somebody who had COVID-19. And the responsibilities simply included making a lot of phone calls and entering data on a spreadsheet. So while you may not feel like I'm using my biology CMB major certification at a high level, well, the starting salary was, in my opinion, competitive enough for the type of work you're doing. And for a lot of folks looking for jobs right out of college, that turned out to be a very valuable stop in the field. And those jobs sort of bloomed right around April or May, and they were offered through the New York City Department of Health. So moving back to our talk, clinical biologists, what do they do? Utilizing digital technologies to interpret clinical cultures, identification and diagnostics, develop, validate laboratory assays. So something like right now, most of the assays used to diagnose COVID-19 infections utilizes a technology known as the polymerase chain reaction. As a clinical microbiologist, if you wanted to design or optimize newer technologies that may be based on polymerase chain reactions, the Federal Emergency Authorization Act that was passed earlier in the year, and it was designed to allow folks to innovate and develop new technologies without having to go through as much of the regulatory hurdles. This opened the door for clinical diagnostic technologies, which in part led to a lot of jobs being created in those areas. So again, if you're falling in that category of saying, how could I design a better rapid response test for COVID? Do I want to always go to the CityMD and have to wait up to 2 weeks? How can we get maybe a point of care test that we can do quickly to give me my answer back in 5 minutes? If you have questions like this and you're interested in being part of a team to explore and develop these technologies, now you're looking at the road of a clinical microbiologist, from which your 4-year degree in the CMB major at John Jay can put you on that path, okay? So here's various sites. Notice everywhere, everywhere related mostly to science: hospital, commercial diagnostics reference laboratories, as I just mentioned, such as Quest Diagnostics, private industry, academia. So where you go to as a clinical microbiologist, not only on a local level do you have lots of options, but also on a national level and even a global level. So consider this as you're planning your career. Do I want to stay in New York? How does my degree translate overseas, for example? And the good news is science and medicine is almost a global passport. So you get to really, really start. When I say think out the box, now you can really go outside the box. So I'm just going to I'm not going to read word for word here, but this is highlighting the education requirements for several positions in the clinical microbiology field. And you could see starting from the least amount of education required in terms of college level associate degree, the medical laboratory technician is enough if you have an associate's degree and you complete an accredited program, okay? And such an individual here in a medical laboratory technician, you may work in a hospital, for example, in a standard laboratory that may measure blood serum levels for patients who are diabetic, or various cases where you're working out of a hospital and you're just analyzing, you're placing collected blood samples into various instrumentation to give the doctors some information of what they're looking for in the serum, whatever it is they're interested in monitoring, okay? That would be a medical laboratory technician, okay? The pay is in New York, five figures. Maybe I don't have the starting salary, but that's what we could use the Bureau of Labor Statistics website to look for salary scales. Then we have a medical laboratory scientist. Notice now we need a bachelor's degree, and the roles for this may involve a little bit more sophistication outside of just running standard instrumentation, okay? And as we move up to the advanced degree field, once you get to a director level, now your responsibilities may be more in respect to designing an assay to monitor, let's say, how we're going to monitor COVID infections, what assays are we going to use, how are we going to interpret the data. Your responsibilities become encompass more than just performing the experiment, okay? And as you can see, the level of specialization and degrees required advances for each position. While the degrees while the advanced degrees that are required for each position increases, also I should emphasize the salary increases significantly with each position. So that's important to recognize, folks. And in this slide here, it highlights the roles you'll play, which summarizes sort of what I was saying. The director, you have your manager, you have a supervisor, then you could have various technicians and scientists all working under the umbrella of a clinical microbiology group. Similarly, public health microbiologists, now we're having conversations such as tracing, when we start saying contact tracing, testing. This is where it starts, that interface between epidemiology and bench work, where it sort of blends together in the public health sector. And you could see, where do health microbiologists work? We have local, state, or national public health laboratories, such as the CDC or NIH, various universities, environmental laboratories. And similarly, a public health microbiologist, the minimal requirement begins at the bachelor level. And it says, well, we want to see if you have a little bit of training in a clinical or public health laboratory. At the director's level, again, you have to have either your doctorate or a medical degree, various advanced degrees as we see here in microbiology or molecular biology. And at that point, once you have that, as I mentioned, for the clinical microbiology labs, you're now in a more of a director's role, overseeing the operation and hand. And a summary slide here highlights this sort of hierarchy, that at the doctorate level, you're directing this institute of interest. And now you have this, what we call the working group here, various folks under your supervision to perform specific tasks. In this case, if the question is, we're thinking about COVID-19 analysis, the lab tech may be the person who's running the actual COVID experiment in concert with the microbiologist. Ultimately, the information acquired through such testing may be analyzed with the manager and director level, and maybe the director may then say, here are the strategies we want to take moving forward. Here are the adjustments we suggest that should be made in interpreting how this testing is performed and how we disseminate the information to the public. So that was just a sort of a basic scenario I try to promote there. Workforce survey, salaries by region. Once again, as we look at lab scientists all the way to the director position, this is what I mentioned a few slides earlier, in that the salaries clearly shift in the up direction as you go from positions that require an associate degree to having a PhD degree, or a bachelor's degree to a PhD. We could see the difference where you're almost starting in six figures, uh, depending on your location, if you're working at the director and deputy levels. Okay, and this would be a range of starting salaries, and this would be our median salary. Okay, so you could see where the low end of the scale and the upper end of the scale. So the bottom line is, as a lab scientist with a 4-year degree, 53,000 starting salary. Keep in mind, in a lot of public positions, this also comes with a retirement package and health benefits. However, I'm not a human resources specialist, but I just want to emphasize that this number, this salary would be, it may not be the best, but when you start counting the benefits that are included, it's definitely a good starting point. Okay, and there's room to grow in the field itself. A few more annual salary snapshots here for clinical laboratory techs, for staff, section manager, lab manager, giving you a sense of how much, again, laboratory direct, more information on annual salaries. And is either profession for you? If you are interested in healthcare and keeping people healthy, fascinated by all kinds of germs in their DNA, RNA, prefer touching test tubes versus patients, like to perform a variety of tasks, like watching things grow, example microbes. If you want to see results soon, love to solve mysteries, you want to help control the spread of bad germs, the clinical or the microbiology profession is definitely something that you may be interested in. So with that, I would like to end my presentation and open the floor up for discussion. Thanks for listening, folks. Okay. So, okay, the floor is open for conversation, folks.
So I have a question.
Go for it.
What can students do while they're at John Jay to be able to be competitive for a position as one of the, as a technician, or maybe go into medical, well, not medical school, but a doctoral degree or a master's degree in biology?
Okay, so sorry that I didn't get all of the question. It was a little lag on my end, but I got, you said, let me just be clear that I got the gist of it. What can students do to compete in order to, or compete and prepare themselves in order to have an opportunity, whether it's at the technical level or going to post bachelor's level education? Did I get that right?
That's right.
Okay, so as the director of the program, but not just the director, as a faculty member, former student, everything all bundled up in one. I would say at this stage of your career, okay, if you're as a sophomore, for example, the first thing I would say is make sure you're comfortable with coursework. By your second year, you should have established command. And what I mean by that is that you should be relatively comfortable trying to get a B or better, or not trying, getting, let's just be clear, getting a B or better in your classes. That way, what we're planning is the next 2 years where the most critical, most important thing that you can do for your undergraduate tenure is to find your way into a research program. And I think, you know, where we've come from, John Jay, especially the work that Edgardo and Gabby and other folks in our undergraduate research program has done over the last 6 or 7 years, has been tremendous to prepare students to find their way into faculty-sponsored research labs where they could perform some level of experimentation, even if it's not what you're interested in, okay? Even if it's not what you're interested in. The goal here is to get training in science, okay? Move beyond just getting A's in your classroom, but actually now getting that research experience, solving problems, going through the process of a scientist, troubleshooting experiments, optimizing them, so that your junior and senior years, you really polish that aspect, or not polish, you polish it in grad school, but you really start getting a sense of what it's like doing daily experiments And that in itself will make, in terms of the competitiveness of your application, well, recommendation letters are critical. So applying to any graduate program, it's required that you have recommendation letters. And if you simply have academic references that says you got A's in all of your classes and you asked really great questions and demonstrated knowledge of the subject matter, that only speaks to the fact that you're good at coursework. It doesn't really speak to the idea of how you will work within teams, how do you work in situations where the experiment does not go as planned? Can you troubleshoot? Can you optimize? Can you communicate effectively? And at the opportunities you can get within our department, within this major, is where I would say you should take advantage of that immediately. Okay, get involved with research. This will make your application competitive. That's the key word. Always remember, there are fewer jobs, tons of students, and lots of students have 4.0 science GPAs. What can you do to separate yourself from that, to stand out? So in some research opportunities, I could go on for weeks. That is the number one thing I would say. Get involved with faculty-sponsored research. Fantastic question. Does John Jay offer it? Lisa, question for Lisa. John Jay offers CMB. I'm going to assume you're writing CMB as a minor. Well, we have a biology and a chemistry minor. So I'm also the director of the biology minor. And the biology minor may be suited for someone if you wanted to go into a, let's say, a career in public health or neuroscience, and you wanted to say, I don't need certain courses in a bio major, okay, such as advanced organic chemistry or biochemistry, just general biology, general chemistry courses, because I plan to go into maybe a public health related field. That's what our minor would be very useful for. I mean, ultimately our minor is offered for non-science majors who just want to put their foot in the door and are considering a science career possibly down the road or incorporating science. Specifically our forensic psych students, they tend to have the highest enrollment in our minor. So hopefully that addresses that question in the text box. Anything else? All right. Not sure, Gabby, do I turn it over to you at this point if there are no other questions?
Well, if there are no other questions, we are done.
Well, folks, listen, regardless if you had questions today or not, showing up is important. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to show up, and I would like any of you to reach out to me directly. We could always have a one-to-one Zoom meeting. If the college was open, I usually have one day a week, which I hold open office advisement hours. Right now it's by appointment only. So if there's anything you want to talk career-wise, course-wise, that's what I'm here for. I'd be more than happy to meet over Zoom or whatever mechanism you like. A question just came in from Kaylee. What are some other opportunities in the business field related to science? So that's a loaded question, Kaylee, but since I opened that door earlier, in respect, I wanted to frame it in a way that if you were thinking about working in the corporate, one way to think about it would be if you're working in the corporate end of a company, let's say a drug company, Pfizer or Merck, okay, where the overall interest of the company would be to develop therapeutics to combat diseases. So that would be the science and research end. You can work in Pfizer as a research scientist, directing whichever project, or on any level that we discussed earlier in this talk, whether it's a technical level, managing level. So that would be the research division. However, it's still a company for profit. So there will be a corporate division that you would be able to now work in as well. So having knowledge of the field is important if you're now addressing the corporate side, which is, well, I'm no expert on business, corporate practices, but the idea being if you're working on the corporate end and you have a knowledge of science. So merging a business degree with science can lead to opportunities on the corporate end of a pharmaceutical company, for example. I discussed the entrepreneurial end earlier. in a scenario, let's say you have your PhD in molecular biology and you wanted to design a new technology yourself, but you did not want to work for someone. Well, there are many startup grants offered on the federal level and the state level for starting your own company. Okay, believe it or not, it does not take millions of dollars to do your own startup company, but that would be based on the fact that you have a technology that you've developed that you feel you can put on the market and build your own company in that sort of direction. So there are lots of startup companies that may have been purchased by larger companies, startup companies that did not succeed, but it's still the idea being that if you are talented in a sense of you've innovated a new technology and you feel that you can market this on a larger scale, this is the point of saying, yeah, we could think in that direction. Now, does John Jay offer the coursework in terms of business, venture capitalism, things like that? I would say we don't directly, but that's where I would say think about where your next stop will be. Should I go to an institution that does have a business school where I could now explore those areas and think in that direction? Hopefully that brought some details to your question, hopefully. Lisa, can you send your email? The John Jay Webb homepage. If you go to the CMB major, that's where my contact information is. Gabrielle did it already. Rauceo at jjny.cuny.edu. That's where you'll find me. So please send me an email. I'd be more than happy to talk anytime. All righty, folks. So I guess that takes care of my part.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Anytime.
Thank you.
All righty. See you next time.
Bye.